Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm Brett Davis. Joining me today is the Center Square's investigative reporter, TJ Martinell. You authored a story this week headlined, Foreign National Avoids Prosecution After Illegally Voting in Washington 28 Times. Now, what I liked about this story is there is a handy-dandy illustrated graphic in here that outlines all of this. There were 13 foreign nationals who illegally cast 48 ballots in elections. The county prosecutor filed 3 charges for voter fraud. 2 defendants were referred to the diversion program, and there were 0 convictions for fraud. And I mentioned the guy who voted 28 times illegally. And there was also 1 illegal voter who had previously committed 2 Class C felonies prior to deferral. So you did some deep diving into public records about this. Can you tell us what you found? Go into some more detail about that.
I actually got very fortunate. I had someone reach out to me who had already filed these public records requests. So a lot of the legwork had been done by a private citizen, which I really appreciated because I did not know that. Yeah, I was immediately able to go into the records and start looking at it. And I think the most important thing to emphasize is the fact that we have a presumptive right to vote in Washington state, as I've talked about on in other stories, meaning when you register to vote, you do not have to verify or prove that you are eligible to vote. And this plays out in the sense that nobody verifies, so you never know if someone's truly legally allowed to vote. And there's no investigation that's done. In every single one of these cases with these individuals, they came to Clark County elections and said, hey, we want our voting record because we want to become naturalized citizens.
So basically, if they hadn't come forward, they could still be voting and nobody would be any the wiser.
Right. Somebody might argue, well, there was only 13 cases of people not voting or who shouldn't have been voting between this time period. That doesn't sound too bad. No, these are just the ones who came forward. And if they hadn't, we would never know. Like this
could just be the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, this is not an accurate reflection of the potential for voter ineligibility or the number of voters participate in elections who shouldn't be.
And it seems like not much happened to these people, other than, they were told, stop voting. You shouldn't have been voting all this time anyway.
Individual who voted 28 times, for people who don't know, each time is a Class C felony, which is a very serious offense in Washington state. And either charges were not filed against them, or if they were one of the 2 people who got deferred to a diversion program. And so for some people, this reflects the lack of seriousness that voter fraud is treated in Washington state. This doesn't help the case that when people, state officials insist that their voter fraud is taken seriously, when someone who's been voting illegally for 18 years has no consequences.
Right. It seems weird to say that voter fraud doesn't exist when it seems like we're just blissfully unaware of it when it's happening. The only reason we know about these cases are because the people came forward.
Right. And something I didn't realize until I got the public records back. So Clark County said that they don't have the authority to investigate a voter's eligibility, but there's also no state or federal requirement that they report voter fraud. What they do is they forward the information to the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office decides whether to forward charges to the prosecutor, and then the prosecutor decides whether they want to take up the case.
A lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah. So it's interesting as the state is centralizing its voter database and registration stuff and doing these automatic voter registrations for people seeking to obtain enhanced driver's licenses, that there's no central reporting system for voter fraud, so that the state has an idea of how often this is going on and in what counties this is going on.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to check out other counties like King County and see if there's a similar problem there. So I had mentioned previously that one of these people had a criminal record. It apparently goes back to 1984. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is probably the reason why they were charged with voting illegally. It wasn't because they were a foreign national. It was probably because they had a felony. Because when they got charged, it was in 2021 when the state legislature passed a law allowing convicted felons to vote again. They get their right automatically back once they're released from prison or jail. But at the time of this case, that was not how it was. So they had 2 counts of careless driving, which is a gross misdemeanor. They had a 1 count of attempting to elude police, which is a Class C felony. There's 4 counts of driving with a suspended driver's license, which is a gross misdemeanor. And then there's 1 count of harassment, which is a Class C felony. So it's interesting that somebody who has 2 Class C felonies and numerous gross misdemeanors over a 30-year period is voting illegally, which is another Class C felony, and they're still getting diverted to a diversion program rather than.
So he wasn't prosecuted for any of these things?
This was on their criminal record.
Okay, criminal
record. So these were things that the prosecutor noted in the documents where they decided that they were going to defer them to a diversion program rather than charge them for voting illegally. So another Yeah, another example of where somebody has a criminal record, commits a crime, and then they're diverted rather than prosecuted.
Now, do you have any plans to, we mentioned this earlier, look into other counties and see if anything like this is going on?
Yes, I'm definitely interested in investigating other counties and seeing how often this is going on. But I think also one of the big issues is that for people who argue about whether or not there's voter fraud in Washington state, the way things are set up, if it's going on, if there's rampant voter fraud, and what I mean by that is voters who are participating in elections who are not eligible, how would you know? If it's a big problem or a small problem, there's no way to determine that if we're not going to verify whether voters in the voter database are eligible.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For TJ Martinell, this is Brett Davis. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.